Thank you very much. It's good to have music back with us here this fall, and I'm looking forward to a whole season of hearing our choirs sing and play and grace our worship service. So how many of you were here on Wednesday night? Okay, if you weren't here, you missed. What a rush. My gosh. That was just crazy. Shelley, how many people were in church? Was it 127 people in church. We had the overflow open. We served at least that many people for supper. And we had, of course, the kids, they drove in and they saw the bouncy toy on the south, and of course their eyes got big as saucers. And I came in, my son was here, and I said, Christian, there's a bouncy toy. And he said, oh yes, she saw it. and you know, the fun thing was, at least for me, watching the kids was obviously a lot of fun, but it was also fun watching the parents. Because it was like all of a sudden people just slowed down and they stood around and they watched their kids, and some of them knew some of the people they were standing next to, or they gravitated towards someone they knew, and they or else maybe they didn't know anybody, but they just struck up a conversation. And it felt so good to see people just stopping for a moment out of lives that are just way too packed. Stopping for a moment and just sharing a little humanity with someone else. That was so much fun. That was, for me, I mean, the worship was a total kick. We had so much fun in the worship service. The meal was fabulous. Thank you very much. It was amazing. The whole night was great, but for me, that was the big takeaway. It was the fact that here we were just being the church together, just doing life together, and slowing down and spending a little time with someone we know or someone we don't know, and getting to know someone. That was really cool. So next Wednesday, we've got. My hope is that we will have that many people with us again this next Wednesday. We signed up 29 kids for that would be preschool through 6th grade. That doesn't include our confirmation class, and it doesn't include our senior high, for this coming Wednesday. And we hope that they start bringing some folks. And if you know of someone who needs to come, bring them along. Don't just invite them. Just don't show them where the door is. Bring them in the door. All right? It's so important, because I know that what we do here makes a difference. It matters. What we talk about here changes people's lives. And the more folks that can hear that message, the better our world is going to be. The better their lives are going to be. The better our lives are going to be. So, next Wednesday, if you weren't here, come, experience it, bring somebody. And that's not what I came to talk to you about today. I want to start by telling a little story. It was last fall. It was October, and mid-October. And we took a little vacation to Cozumel with Jill's family, her sister, or Joan and John. Most of you know Joan and John. And then Joan has a twin sister. Her name is Jane and Kent. And for the last 20 years, I've been telling Kent about scuba diving and telling him how much fun it was. And John got certified years ago, and Kent finally said, well, I'm going to do it this time. And so he got himself certified to dive, but going to Cozumel was going to be his first ocean dive. And he was excited, but he was also nervous, because he knew that we were going to roll off of a boat and drop into 40 to 60 feet of water right from the get-go. There's no just walking into the water. And so he was a little apprehensive, a little nervous about this. And so the day before our first dive, I had this idea. Let's do a shore dive. Get yourself acclimated. And so, and in this particular part of Cozumel, it's not a walk-in beach. You jump into the water, and you jump into 12 to 15 feet of water, and then there's this wall that goes up to the shore, And the wall has all kinds of coral heads on it and pretty fish, and it's nothing like going out in the big stuff, but it would be a lot of fun. It'd be a great way to acclimate it. So we agreed to do this. And so the plan was we were going to get in at the ladder. We were going to swim south, which is up current, and then just let the current drift us back to the ladder. And because I'd done this many times, and it's a beautiful little dive. So we got in, and it was not this sweet little one-knot current. The current was ripping, absolutely ripping. We were finning just to stay in place. And so we said, should we do it? Yeah, let's do it. So we went underwater. We thought it's a little easier down low, so we got down as low as we could. We started finning. We finned for 15 minutes, and I figured we'd go about 300-400 yards. We didn't make 75 yards. Okay, it was ripping that hard. So we came back. I said, let's go up. I looked at my gauges. We'd blown through half of our air in 15 minutes. A dive like that should last 90 minutes. We'd blown through half of our air because we were just working like crazy. So I came up. I said, you know what? Let's call this. Let's just drift back to the ladder and call it a day. And they said, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. You know, they're out of breath. And so we went back down, and of course then the current takes us. And I forgot to mention to look for the ladder. And those two just turned into sails. They just, boom, straight north. And by the time I got to the ladder and realized what was going on, they were 20 yards past it. I could barely see them. So with all my strength, I fin towards them. I get their attention. I said, we got to go back. And after you're trying to do this underwater with hand signals, and finally they get it, and we start finning back. And it's just an absolute nightmare. We are getting no place. I look at my gauges. It keeps dropping. And finally, after all of that, we got back to the ladder. We climbed the ladder, literally rolled onto the deck. We were so fatigued. And I looked at my gauges, and I had about 100 pounds left. I mean, that was it. I was out. We were all spent. It did not occur to me that there's beautiful scenery to the south, but there's also beautiful scenery to the north in Cozumel. And there are ladders all over the place, including the steps that led back up to our hotel. But I was focused on that ladder, and we had to go back there. I had visions when I'm watching these guys sail off into the distance of having to go back and tell Jane I lost her husband at sea for the first dive. But I was focused on that ladder, and I knew we had to go back. That was the only ladder in the ocean. Let's sing. You know, I think life is like that. There's life the way it's supposed to be, and then there's life the way it really is. And I really think life is meant to, there's a current to life, and it carries us along. It's called the present and the future. And that current has a way of just taking us where it will. And the way life's supposed to be is this beautiful scenery. It's like a shore dive on a 12-foot wall in Cozumel. Leisurely, lovely, with lots of things to see and lots of unknowns up ahead. But there it is. That's the way life's supposed to be. And there are ladders all up and down that shore. And this is where it gets sticky, because sometimes I think we get fixated on the one back there and forget about what's ahead. Let me see if I can explain this a little better. Just recently, a few weeks ago, I had a conversation with a friend of mine. We were met him happenstance in the store, and we got to talking, and he said, I changed churches. I said, yeah, that was a couple years ago. He said, well, I'm not going back to my old church. And I said, well, tell me more. And he smiled, and he said, they're just so cliquey there. And it occurred to me, and I watched him do this, and I saw the smile tense just a little bit. And it occurs to me that it's been 2-3 years since that happened. But he still wasn't at peace with it. He still wanted to go back to that ladder where he got hurt. He wanted to fight back there because the pain is comfortable. He didn't want to let life carry him down to the next thing. He tried, changed churches, but the pain was still there. And he kept swimming back, swimming back, swimming back. I think that happens for a lot of us in a lot of ways. I think, for instance, about this list that Paul writes about. There's something in here for all of us. Chapter 5 of Galatians. Now the works of the flesh are plain. Listen. And see where you fit in all of this. Fornication, impurity, licentiousness, idolatry, which is the worship of things, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, anger, selfishness, dissension, party spirit. Any of those hit you? Any of those ladders that you looked for and it looks to be the only ladder in the ocean for you? I think about, there's nothing wrong with drinking alcohol. But when drinking alcohol becomes a sedative for all the pain and hurt, so much so that you keep going back to that ladder over and over again because it's an easy fix. It dulls what's there, but it doesn't take it away. And pretty soon, this life that carries you from one thing to the next with your relationships and your loves and the people all around you, it gets disrupted. Because you keep wanting to go back to the easy fix ladder. Think about illness the same way. Old age. Life's given me a raw deal. And you keep going back to that ladder, and the currents want to carry you in a brand new direction with all kinds of new frontiers. It's a grace-filled current. And the more that we fight and struggle against it, the stronger the current becomes. Paul doesn't write these things to put a collar on you and say, don't do those things. Don't be naughty. God won't like you. He's not saying that. He puts these things in this letter to the Galatians because he knows that fixing on that ladder back there, whatever it might be, enmity, strife, jealousy, party spirit, drunkenness, essentially, whatever it is, he knows that it short circuits a life well lived, that there's no grace in it, that there's only this comfortable thing that you go back to, that you know time and time again, but you can never get past it. And that's why he writes the way he does. That's why these things he calls the works of the flesh are so deadly. It's not that God's going to zap us with lightning. It's that we're going to miss life. Let's sing. So we were talking about this in a very different way on Wednesday, but it's basically the same thing. You have right here, right now. And you have all of this in front of you. From here till the day you take your last breath. And then you have everything behind you. And what we do here is so important because it puts the past behind you. Whatever that might be. And you can live life freely and to the fullest from here to the end of your days if you keep finding ways to put that past behind you. In the language of Jesus Christ, it's called forgiveness. In the language of Jesus Christ, it's called peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, self-control. The gifts, not of your own abilities or will, but the gifts of God's Spirit. Because that's what Jesus does for you. You know, he hung on the cross, and he could have hung there and said, this is a raw deal. He was whipped and beaten, and he could have said, I don't deserve this. And you know something? He's right. He didn't deserve it. Instead, he said, Father, forgive them. And everything from here on back, all the ways he was mistreated, are gone. So, I have two questions for you. What's your ladder back there? Question one. And question two, why go back? Jesus has died for your sins. He's died for all of that stuff that you keep wanting to go back for. All of those things that tie you up and weight you down and have you swimming against the current called life. What's the ladder? Why go back? Jesus died for you. Live in the now. Live for the future. And know that Jesus has made this possible. And I will tell you that it's the hardest thing in the world to do. Because what's back there, whether you like it or not, it's comfortable. We get used to the pain. We get so that we look for the pain. Because it's a comfortable place to be. But Jesus says, why? It's hard to leave that stuff behind. It's hard to leave all of those things that we've lived with, and they've become such a part of our life behind. But Jesus says, now is the time. Today is the moment. And you know something? Tomorrow will be the moment as well, because the temptation is going to be to go back tomorrow. And the next day is the moment. The temptation is going to be to go back to the ladder. Over and over again. Each day of your life. It's a struggle to remember that there's ladders downstream. But it's way better than living a life in the past. So let me ask one more time as you come to the rail for communion. What's your ladder? Why go back?